Welcome to the Unlocking Senior Resources podcast by Leave the Key. I'm Larry Wagner, and I've spent 30 years working with seniors where I was a certified senior advisor and the last 15 years in the home buying industry as a certified senior transition specialist, where I specialize in dealing with seniors going through a transition in their lives. This podcast is for seniors, those with seniors they love, and people who work in the senior community. In each episode, we bring on a guest who works to improve the lives of seniors. This podcast is your key to unlocking senior resources. Today I'm here with Shari Sugarman of Sugarman Law. Welcome, Shari.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, Tim. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Larry.
So you're an attorney and you work in the estate planning arena amongst other areas of law.
Yes.
So first question I ask, how did you get into law? Something you always wanted to do, or?
It was actually in my law school application, my essay. Back then we didn't have all these really esoteric questions.
Right.
And believe it or not,
I won't ask when back then was, though.
believe it or not, I remember reading the Nancy Drew stories, and her father was an attorney. And when I, 10 years old, I'm like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever. So my father always said I would be a great lawyer because I'm a great liar. I don't know if that was a compliment or not.
I wonder if we should edit that or not. But okay, go ahead.
So I decided that I was going to go into law, and I got my Bachelor of Science degree in paralegal studies with the intent that I was going to go on to law school eventually. I tried to go through ROTC, Air Force ROTC, for a couple of years, but they wouldn't guarantee me a JAG slot. That's the Judge Advocate Corps. So I felt, how am I going to pay for law school? So I took a few years off and eventually went back to law school, went part-time evening, worked during the day. I went to Toro.
Okay.
And then I graduated.
Are you a Long Islander born and bred?
I am not. I was born in South Jersey, grew up outside of Bangor, Maine. And moved here after college.
Okay. Because you mentioned Toro College. I thought you would have said yes. That's the answer I was expecting. My father always taught me, never ask a question unless you know the answer. I blew it that time. Sorry, Dad.
That's what they always say about depositions, too.
That's right, exactly.
Don't ask the question if you don't already know the answer.
I say I should have been a lawyer, but I just failed the test, apparently. So I know what to do. I just didn't do it. So now you knew you wanted to be in law. You've now made it there. And what was your journey like as an attorney?
I clerked for a lot of different places. I clerked for Surrogate Radigan when he was in Nassau County. I clerked for Judge Oshrin for a short period of time through the school. And then I landed a job at Devitt Spellman, which was not a surety company, education law. So I learned a lot, and then
What is education law?
Education law, well, that's, a lot of schools are self-insured,
right?
Through New York School Insurance Reciprocal Company. So if somebody gets into a fight and the teachers knew about it and they knew that they had bad blood,
right,
the school has a duty to provide adequate supervision.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't and somebody gets hurt, they could be liable.
So you defended the schools or you sued the schools?
We defended the schools.
Okay. So it's funny, you said you worked and you learned a lot, very appropriate for an educational law.
Yeah,
very good.
It was more of an insurance liability issues,
right,
and for schools. Then I landed a job at a slightly larger firm in Melville, and they did litigation, they did banking, they did estate planning, they did a lot of different things. I was put into the commercial litigation section. And I did okay, didn't love it, but I learned a lot.
Right.
And this was before, we had Westlaw and Lexis and such like that, but we didn't use it. So I had to know how to use the books, which I did.
Yes.
And, it's a shame that the newer people, graduating don't know how to use the books. But, I don't use the books either anymore. I just go online.
Right. Regarding the books, I used to own a custom cabinet shop. And our biggest client was a company that made law libraries full of offices. And we did all the woodwork for them.
Nice.
I don't know if that company's still in business anymore. There probably are no more new law libraries.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
It's a shame, but everything's online. It's
right. Everything's online.
A blessing and a curse.
And it's easy to find, and it takes up a lot less space.
Oh yeah, and it's much more efficient for the client too, because you don't have to pay 15 hours worth of research. You can pay for 2 because you find it much quicker.
Right.
So And then I went to a surety law firm, and that was interesting. So performance bonds for construction, surety bonds for lawyers or guardians who aren't protecting are supposed to protect the assets of their wards. They have to have a bond. And so if they didn't perform, they contact the bonding agency. So I was involved in so much different things. I went to do depositions and investigate records at architects' offices. I was up on the Comex High School roof inspecting the roof. I went to Connecticut to go look at architects' records. We're talking boxes and boxes, rooms of boxes of documents. So that was interesting, but also a little boring.
But you were saying, like people in the estate arena need that as well?
Yes.
Does that mean an executor of an estate would need a surety bond?
It depends.
Okay.
That's
a very lawyer answer, by the way.
It's always. It depends what the facts are. Because I can't give you a regular answer, but it depends on what the facts are. So if you are an executor and the difference between an executor and an administrator is that you've been named in a will.
Correct.
If you are an administrator or you're looking to be appointed the administrator, there is no will. So if New York State, if you don't have a will, New York State has a plan for you. May not necessarily be your plan.
Correct.
So that's why you do have a will. But if you don't have a will, it goes to your spouse. If you have spouse and children, it goes to your spouse and children. If you have children, it goes to your children, the spouse, etc. If you don't have children or a spouse, it goes to your parents. If your parents are deceased, it goes to your siblings. If you don't have siblings, it goes to your cousins, and so on and so on and so on. So, there is a way to do it. But back to your question is if there's a will, you can have a will contest. It's hard. And, it's fraud is a reason to contest it. The person doesn't have the mental capacity to create that will. The other one's extreme duress. For example, when I do a will and the daughter has contacted me, I need to speak to that person directly. I want to make sure that it's not going to, why are we giving everything to this particular daughter? As opposed and cutting out the rest of them. So I recently did have that. The wife was very, very sick. One of the two daughters mentioned she's in Florida. She's like, Dad, I don't want to be the executor anymore. But it was a little suspicious when the other daughter calls me and wants me to set up a will and Dad isn't on the phone. And I want to make sure that there's no possibility of duress. She's bringing the person to the office. She's found the lawyer. She, everything now goes to her. It's a little fishy. Another instance would be, like all of a sudden your mom has kept you in the will for years, but now the handyman's son is getting everything. So that's a little odd, a little suspicious. So you really have to, it's not just drafting a will, you have to know what's going on.
I was in the financial advisory business for 30 years. And one day, one of our clients we knew for decades, I joined my father. He was in the business 10 years before that. She was probably a client over 30 years, her and her husband. Husband dies. She's in her 90s. She's losing capacity. And she comes in, wants to change all her beneficiaries to her caretaker, who was her husband's caretaker.
Ding, 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 red flag.
So we have to get the paper signed. She's there. We can't not sign them. Then we call our compliance department. So what do? So there's nothing you can do. The law has since changed. But back in the 90s, there was nothing we could do. And it was so obvious that she's being taken advantage of. She's worth millions of dollars. And we knew another advisor of hers did the same thing. When she died, this woman got millions of dollars. And she took care of the family for about 5 years. That's a hefty payday for 5 years. That's a hefty payday.
To me, that's a clear red flag.
Correct.
And you were right to question it, but unfortunately, there's nothing you could do.
They say now I left the business 6 years ago, but in the last number of years there was. But
I have enacted a lot of protections for seniors. One of the biggest things I see out there is seniors getting defrauded all the time.
All the time.
It breaks my heart I have one particular client, she came to me for a foreclosure and a modification. And we started looking into her records, and we're like, what's going on here? She was defrauded. She sent money down to an investor in Florida, and we're trying to track that down for her. There's not a lot we can do because it happened a couple of years ago, but she almost lost her home because of it, because she took out all this money on a home equity line of credit. And now she can't pay it back.
Yeah.
So, you have to be really, really careful. You have to have trusted advisors.
Correct.
And we also were concerned about this woman's potential ability to process things. And we think that she's got the beginning stages of dementia. So we contacted her family, not that we really wanted to, because, I'm attorney-client privilege. But we were concerned that she couldn't even pay her day-to-day bills. So her sister is stepping in.
Okay.
So, which actually brings me to a very important point. Powers of attorney are one of the most important things a person can do at any age.
Yes.
When you turn 18 and you're an adult now, you are an adult.
Yes.
You don't have to tell your parents anything. They may be paying for college, but the college doesn't have to tell them.
That makes me crazy. I'm sorry, 18, you're not an adult. Not when you might care.
I agree. You can't drink, but you can vote and go to war.
That's right.
So, my son was 18 in 3 days, and he had that power of attorney signed to grant me and my husband the ability to speak to anybody on his behalf.
Right.
Potential client came in a few years ago, and his sister was the guardian of her son's two small children. Her son had passed away. She's the guardian. She's got dementia. She can't cash checks. Now he's got to become the guardian of her, and he's got to become the guardian of the children. And it was going to be a very expensive proposition.
Right.
He didn't retain me because of the cost, but, I often wonder what happened.
Right.
And, if the sister had had a power of attorney, many of these things could have been alleviated.
Right.
He still would have had to become the guardianship of the children.
Right.
Or they could have done a standby guardianship. He could have been the standby guardian when they did the regular guardianship.
Yep.
So it's very hard. And then there's there's a specific form, actually, you can designate somebody to be your guardian if you know that it's part of the estate planning process. We have that form. Like my husband is designated as my guardian, so he doesn't have to. He still has to be appointed, but it's my request.
So he's your guardian. Does he become your guardian when something specifically happens to you?
Yes, he can go petition the court, and it's my permission, and I don't have to go to court, etc. Because I have limited guardianship experience.
Right.
Usually what I deal with is people who have autistic children who cannot be by themselves. They can't manage their lives. So we do what's called a 17A guardianship proceeding in surrogate's court to have the parents appointed by the time when they turn 18. So they can't sign a power of attorney, but the parents can go get a petition to become their guardian. And in that form, we do a standby guardian. In case the parents aren't there, then we have a brother or sister or somebody else become the standby guardian.
So it's interesting. So people don't realize that your parent is not your guardian once you're 18.
No.
And because we have a disabled granddaughter, and that's going to be an issue when she's only 2.5. Okay. So in 15 and a half years, we have to cross that bridge, but it's a simple enough thing to do. But people think they're in charge of their children, so to speak, legally. But it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
I've done that probably a dozen times over the last 20 years. And it's mostly for friends and friends who have come to me because they have that problem.
Right. That's very important to know. That's really important to know. And the same thing with getting your power of attorney.
Mm-hmm.
The kid goes off to college. You don't know what's going to happen. What's happening. He or she is away for the first time. Typically, maybe sleepaway camp doesn't count. Right. They're controlled there. In college, they are not.
Yeah.
That's really critical. People don't think of that. I got to tell you, I had thought of that myself.
Well, my son was going to is going to Maritime College, and he at first thought he was going to become a third mate on a big ship, and they go out for months at a time.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't have the ability to be able to do things on his own behalf. That without that power of attorney, I wouldn't be able
Right.
to do it either.
Right.
So,
Interesting. But let's go back to your story. So you're now Sugarman Law. What transpired to get you to work for yourself?
I had my son.
There you go.
I was working for the surety construction litigation
So
firm.
18 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I enjoyed the work. It was good litigation. I did some trial work and such like that. But when I had my son, I was like, oh, I love my baby. I don't want to go to work. I worked for about 5 months with them. They were really good to me. They would let me work part-time, and my husband was air traffic controller at the time, so he had weird shifts.
Right.
And so it was good. But about 6 or 7 months in, I was like, oh, I don't want to work anymore.
Right.
So I stayed home.
Right.
And then I realized after about, I don't know, 2 weeks, this is not for me.
Being a mom's nice, but
I
work.
hand it to all the stay-at-home moms.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Right.
It wasn't me.
Yeah.
And my son, I asked him one year, I'm like, do you want me to be class mom? He's like, no. No. You're much too busy for that, but I appreciate the request. I'm like, okay. But they always say if you want something done,
Right.
give it to a busy person.
Correct. Yeah.
Somebody who can't say no. So after a few weeks, in a few months, I folding laundry, and a phone call came in from an old friend of mine who did mortgages. And he said, oh, I'm working with this mortgage company, and they're putting a real estate agency and a mortgage company in this particular office. They're building it. We'd like to meet you and see if you want to rent an office. And I was like, you mean go out on my own? It was never a contemplation. Right. There was a lot of people in law school. Oh, I'm going out on my own. I'm going to have my own single. I needed the experience. I didn't want to just go learn it. It's really scary, because you're learning to run a business as well as practicing law, and it's hard. So he invited me to look at the potential office. I didn't ultimately take it, but then I said, you know what? I'm going to start taking clients from home.
Right.
And I went back to my real estate background, which I worked for a real estate developer when I was a paralegal. Right. Before I went to law school, and I learned from some of the best. Mm-hmm. And so I went and did real estate because it was easy. There are no such things as easy real estate too. But then about a year, my son was almost 2 years old. So in this year, this March, it'll be 20 years that I went out on my own. I had a small little office. First, I worked from my kitchen table, and that didn't really work very well. But it was flexible. So, I went to play dates. Uh-huh. So I had, back then we had the little earpieces in there. Yeah. And I would run it from my cell phone. So I'd, pick up, I go, Shari Sugarman. And the kids would march around going, Shari Sugarman, beep, Shari Sugarman, beep. It was cute. So
kids really know how to imitate really well. They're so observant.
Yeah. And let me tell you some of the stories my son has said to me after he heard me. I'm like, oh, gotta watch what I say in front of him. So then I had an opportunity to rent in a small office from an IT guy and an accountant, his brother. And then eventually I moved down to a much bigger office with another attorney. And then 12 years ago, I moved into my current space over in Deer Park.
In Deer Park. Okay. That's right. Deer Park, that's my stomping ground when I had my cabinet business I mentioned before. And what does Sugarman Law look like right now?
We have a full-time paralegal, Cynthia. She's amazing. Mm-hmm. I have my full-time office manager, Rhonda, who's been with me 10 years this year. Wow. She is one of the most loyal, the best people that you'll ever meet. I take on interns quite frequently. I have a current intern. Her name is Nina. She's from Deer Park, and she came to me a year ago. She was 16. She knew she wanted to be a lawyer, and she wanted the experience in a law office. So she's worked for me for about a year now. Now she's doing her senior experience credit class. So she's my intern for that. So she's getting credit for working for me.
That's perfect.
And then I have another part-time woman, Alexandra, and she only recently started with me it's been about 5 weeks now. She's a new mom, and she didn't want to go work full-time or even full part-time. So I gave her an opportunity to clean up my systems,
Right.
do my documents, and she knows my operating system. It's called Carrot Legal. I use that, and she knows it really, really well.
Mhm.
So she's making it efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So and I also rent 2 of my office suites to 2 other lawyers. One is he does a lot of the same things I do, but he also handles bankruptcy. And I just had a relationship with Carletta Sober, who just moved in with me, and she is a guardianship contract attorney.
Okay, so overlapping. You could
Yeah,
say
we have
that.
a lot of overlapping, and it's good because if I can't answer the question, I can go pick their brains. So
It's so important. You need the collaboration, the co-op, to be able to bounce ideas off of other people. I
yes.
find most good ideas come from conversation, and you get to do that now. And so you could research all you want, but having a conversation, it's like a brainstorming session.
It's the experience that you're
Right.
drawing from.
Right.
A lot of times I'll walk in, I'll be like, I think I just answered my own question, but what's your point?
Right.
What's your take on this?
We do all the time. We buy houses and renovate houses for a living, and we typically buy them for senior citizens, and there's usually some sort of problem involved. And we consider ourselves a problem-solving company. We buy houses, but we're a problem-solving company. Sometimes buying the house solves the problem. Sometimes it's the way you do it. Sometimes it doesn't involve buying the house. You can solve their problem and they still get to keep the house. But that's not my favorite part. But we do it through, there's a bunch of us in the company that will all get together and talk. Usually 3 or 4 of us, not necessarily all of us at one time. Because I could think all I want, but I'm much better talking it out with other people. And I find that's very common. And that's what you have the opportunity to do.
Collaboration is key.
And it serves your clients so well. And it serves their clients so well, your cohorts.
Absolutely.
So that's a really nice relationship. I love that. I love that. Hi, I'm Larry.
And I'm Ben. We're the father and son team of Leave the Key Home Buyers, and we want to buy your house.
We specialize in working with seniors who are transitioning out of their homes, and we understand what you are going through.
So if you're considering selling your home and would like an alternative to the traditional overwhelming process, reach out and see how we can help.
Do you have an outdated home?
No need to update anything.
Have a home that needs repairs?
Don't bother with repairs.
Don't want to take everything with you?
Leave whatever you want behind.
Dreading the headaches that come with agents?
Sell your home without paying a commission.
Dreading prying neighbors, attending open houses, and passing judgment on your home?
No need for public showings.
When you sell to us, you'll have all the certainty of closing on your timeline, not someone else's, and there's absolutely no pressure.
Visit leavethekey.com or call us today for a no-obligation offer at 631-388-7771 if you want to sell your home today.
So question, if we want to put some legal meat and potatoes into this conversation,
Okay.
what would you say is the thing that you see most that people need to know? Because either they don't do it, probably because they don't do it, be my guess.
Well, I because I have a significant real estate background, I always am dealing with seniors who are now selling their homes. How many times have you refinanced your home? Probably, if you've owned your house for 20 or 30 years, you've probably done it a couple of times.
Right.
So when you go to sell the house, sometimes the satisfaction mortgage isn't recorded properly.
Oh, we just had one of those.
All the
It
time.
took so long for them to find it.
So you need to keep, if the bank sends you a document that relates to your mortgage,
Right.
keep it.
Right.
You could throw it out when you sell, but keep it. Even if it's 20 years old,
Right.
keep it. We just closed out our home equity line of credit because the draw period was down, and it's on my husband's name. And I told him, I'm like, make sure you call them to close it out,
Right.
but make sure that you get the satisfaction of mortgage. He's like, why? It's closed out.
It's closed out.
I'm like, it doesn't matter. The mortgage is still on the property. It's not a mortgage. Like, yes, it is. It's a mortgage. It's on your property.
We had one that was closed out 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. It took weeks to resolve that problem.
Usually there's a title exception called an agent mortgage affidavit, and if you can show them proof
Right.
that it's been paid off, some sort of closing disclosure,
Right.
or a letter or
Right.
something, and it's not on your credit report, the title companies will accept
That's
this.
how we resolved it, actually. Exactly what you said. They're able to find some ancient thing in their personal archives. We've got nothing from the mortgage company. And so we had to resolve it ourselves.
We've actually had to bring quiet title actions because of that, which it's a request to the court to say that, yes, this has been paid off and and that mortgage has been satisfied. It's a court order. So that's a big thing. So things to the senior word, keep the paperwork.
Okay, let me ask you a question on that. I've refinanced my house twice. I was able to refinance my house the first time and buy a 27-year apartment building with the money.
Nice.
That's to give an idea what apartment buildings were selling for back. This was in Connecticut.
Nice.
But anyway, no, you can't do that anymore.
No.
They got way more expensive. But I refinanced twice with the same institution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I have any of that paperwork. But if it's the same institution, does that make it cleaner?
Makes it a little bit cleaner, but there is something called MERS. So a lot of you'll get a mortgage from a mortgage banker or a mortgage broker, and they will sell that mortgage, and you'll see MERS, Mortgage Electronic Registration Service, and then the mortgage will be transferred internally, and then we have to track down the chain of title, basically. So that can be an issue, but it's not something that the layperson would have. But it's always good to keep the paperwork. If you've refinanced even with the same institution, you're going to have probably something called a CEMA. Consolidation Extension Modification Agreement. It means you've extended the loan. You've modified the first part, but then you added new money to it. And then they have all this other paperwork, and it'll come up. But if anybody wants, they can go onto the Suffolk County Clerk's website and search their property.
Does that work in Nassau County as well?
I don't know what their website is. I do a lot of mostly Suffolk, but call a title company.
Because we've had issues with the two counties. The websites are very different. Things on Suffolk we can't get on Nassau.
Yeah. But ever since Suffolk County had the hack, they were able to. Now you have the ability to go in and you can get a certified copy of your deed for like $5.
Yes,
it's wonderful.
Yes,
but you can also go in and take a look at what kind of mortgages are on your property, if you've got any judgments on your property, and things like that. And believe it or not, a red light camera ticket that remains unpaid is a judgment on your property.
That seems crazy.
Well, yeah, it's a lien.
It's a lien. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go from an estate planning point of view.
Okay.
Share some stories are very illustrative. People relate to stories and they see themselves in these stories. What kind of stories can you share that people can say, oh, that's me, I need to blank,
I have a client who he's a longtime friend, actually. I've known him. He got married the same year we got married. He had a baby. Unfortunately, baby has, she's very, very much disabled. And now the wife is disabled. And he's retired, and he wants to buy a house to make sure that his wife can, it has to be a certain type of house, et cetera. And so we are putting together a special needs trust. He's got a nice pension and retirement account, so we're dealing with that. We got to deal with the house. We can't disinherit the wife entirely because they have something called an elective share. A spouse has an elective share, meaning if you can't disinherit your spouse.
I thought you could with permission.
You can, but the problem in this one, the extra wrinkle on this one is that she may go on Medicaid.
Right.
So if she goes on Medicaid, guess who's going to claw back that money?
So she doesn't have the right to say, I don't want the inheritance.
No.
Even if it's done prior to going on Medicaid?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So if she does it, and then even the 5-year look back, if she did it, but
that's been I thought at first I was going to do 2 special needs trusts, split everything that way. And then a colleague of mine said, you can't do that. It's tricky. It's so that you have to go to an attorney who knows what they're doing. They can't just, pop in a trust and say, hey, it's all perfect.
Right.
You have to make sure that you have all these little nuances to make sure that the unthinkable actually happens.
Right. So do you have the husband? Can he divest himself of assets through trusts, things of that nature?
Yes, and that's what we are doing. He's doing a revocable trust as opposed to an irrevocable trust so that he maintains, because he's in perfect health, and he just wants to make sure that his daughter and his wife are protected.
Correct.
The daughter we can protect very well with a special needs trust. The wife, it's tricky. We have to really kind of create a special needs trust for her, do a testamentary trust, meaning one that's in the will.
Right.
And then now we have the revocable trust it's very, very, it's complicated.
I thought a revocable trust had no teeth when it comes to estate planning.
A revocable or irrevocable?
Irrevocable does. I thought revocable did. Very bad choice of words because they're
Yeah.
too easily confused.
One could be considered, a lot of people call them the living trust or a
Right.
trust. Okay.
Yes.
So the difference between a revocable trust and an irrevocable trust is maintaining control.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why many people will do a revocable trust in their 50s, early 60s, they still want the control to be able to do it. And you can revoke the trust, everything goes away, etc. It doesn't protect you from Medicaid, and it doesn't protect you from creditors because you have full control.
Correct.
So
that's the lack of teeth I was referring to.
Yeah,
right. Yes.
But the point about it, though, and that's why people use it, is because it passes the assets
right
as through the trust.
Right, without going through
without
probate,
having to go through probate.
And it's private and everything else. Yep.
Yeah. New York it just instituted what's known as a ladybird deed in a lot of other jurisdictions.
For the first
But
time.
on Long Island, it's called, or New York, I should say, it's called a transfer on death deed. So the biggest problem, and it really was highlighted during COVID because so many people were dying and it was taking forever to probate things. It was taking a year or more,
right?
Because the courts were so overwhelmed. And it's still in the city. Oh, it takes forever.
Oh gosh, we're dealing with in Brooklyn. I don't want to even go.
You don't want to even go there.
Years.
Yeah. So
and the spouse is 80. It was 80 when we started. He's 83 now. And it's still not resolved, and he's sitting on $1 million house, waiting to sell it. We're waiting to buy it, and he has no money.
Yeah.
So he has no money, and he's sitting on $1 million worth of future cash. We'll talk. There you go.
So a transfer on death deed allows the person to transfer the property as of the date of death,
right?
As opposed to waiting 2 years by statute to sell it,
right?
And the heirs could have sold it. But you have to wait 2 years because they want to make sure that there's no claims against the estate that have to be satisfied. But that really puts a lot of people into perspective, and they're in a lot of trouble because they can't sell their house.
Yeah,
they can't even mortgage it. They can't get a reverse mortgage. They can't do anything. So a transfer on death deed it passes for seamless type of transfer to your beneficiaries, and you can revoke it at any time by just simply filing another form that says we're revoking it. So if you want to change your beneficiaries, you do. I had a client, a very dear friend of mine. His father passed away, and he had a will done through LegalZoom.
Okay,
it wasn't witnessed properly.
Oh God. So it's not valid.
Well,
the court has to choose to accept it.
It was witnessed, but it wasn't. We didn't have the attesting affidavits of the witnesses, so we had to go track down those witnesses. It took time. It took a lot of extra effort, a lot of extra billing.
Right.
We found one of the three. And we're able to have somebody else saying, yes, this is my father's handwriting. So it was an affidavit of handwriting.
Right.
We got one attesting. We got the one that we were able to track down, and then another affidavit by myself detailing what I did to track these people down. And the court finally granted it, but it took an extra 9 months.
Oh, gosh.
So we were in contract to sell this house for almost a year because we couldn't even probate. I mean, a will. We had a will,
right.
And it still wasn't proper.
Normally, a buyer wouldn't stick around that long.
They really wanted this house.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. The good to know.
Yeah. So the interplay between knowing the real estate as well as knowing estate planning has been very very helpful to me because I can solve a lot of the problems that have occurred. I wouldn't call it negligence, but just lack of attention.
People don't know.
They don't know. And that's why I'm hoping this actually will help people understand better, the power of attorney.
Right.
A healthcare proxy. If you are a senior and your spouse is gone and you want to appoint you want your kids to come to the doctor's appointment, they can't actually talk unless you give permission.
Right.
And because of HIPAA, the privacy. Yeah. Each individual doctor you can say, I want my daughter to have this information. So everybody knows that on the forms. But if you have a healthcare proxy, it removes all question.
So question for you. I'm going for surgery tomorrow. And they said, they just actually gave me a blanket form for a healthcare proxy. I said, I already have one. Is the one the hospital gives you much different on a healthcare proxy than what I would have in my file?
Uh, Probably not
That-
too much different. It
yeah.
is a New York statutory form.
That's what I thought.
Mine looks a little different, but it contains the same information.
Because I thought that was a pretty basic, straightforward. Of all the forms, I thought that'd be the most basic. So,
Power of attorney, though, is, I know I keep harping on the power of attorney, but you can make a POA as broad or as narrow as you need it.
Right.
Often we've used it in a real estate arena where the seller or the purchaser couldn't come to the closing.
Right.
But that's a very specific idea.
Right.
But for estate planning, we use like a 10-page one. We have all these additional extra things that you wouldn't even know about. Take care of my pets.
Huh.
I've
never seen that actually.
Yeah, I have that in my form. Access to all my digital information, my passwords, my Google account, my everything. And so, as you learn, you add more things to it.
You think that would be part of a standard form at this point? I guess everything's electronic today.
Yeah, everything's electronic. And you don't have, your kids won't, they don't necessarily have the ability to go into your Yahoo account and change the password.
Right.
Or get your information, or go into your doctor's portal and change the information, get that information without a power of attorney.
I called Optimum to try to change the billing on my account. And I felt like I was trying to break into Fort Knox.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of questions they asked, it's my cable company. And I could not, what's so private about my cable company that they'd ask me a million questions? I needed my online password, which I don't know, my phone password, it's definitely an online password. I didn't know it. They literally asked me about 7 or 8 questions. They wanted me to talk about a recent bill.
That is because those are actually the most easily hacked.
Oh, is that what it is? So it's not a privacy thing.
It's not a privacy issue. Okay. It's more of a fraud issue.
Got it.
I had my chiropractor actually had gotten, he pays his bills on time all the time. And he gets a phone call from what he thought was PSE&G.
Right.
And they're saying, we're going to turn off your power because you haven't paid money. And he's like, what are you talking about? I have it all right here. He actually was able to run down to the local office. I forget what, it was a couple of years ago, and he's like, oh, that's a scam.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that answers that question. But I was trying to pay it. Just a quick one. I was giving the bank money. I was making a deposit, and I didn't have a current driver's license during COVID when DMV was closed, and my license expired in May, and COVID began in March. So I couldn't deposit money. I was at the bank for 45. This is like 6 months later, after COVID started. I was in the bank 45 minutes. I said, "What are you worried about? Worried about fraud? I'm giving you money." I don't say yes, but you can maybe take it back out, but it's got to clear before you let me take it back out.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough. I'm not near as smart as criminals are. So I don't understand how it could actually fraud a bank by giving them money, but they said I can.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, because I actually will, in a real estate closing, if my seller is gone, I will, a lot of times I'll go to the bank after the closing and deposit it.
Right.
But I always make sure that I have their deposit slip.
Right.
So, it's, but, and they ask me for my ID and all that stuff. But fraud is so huge and rampant that, I just, it breaks my heart when I see seniors getting defrauded left, right, and center.
I have a whole bunch of stories. I'm not. This is your moment, so I don't want to go into them.
We won't go there.
What other?
If you think it's a scam, it probably is.
If you think it's a scam, it probably is. That's a very good way of putting it. Another important thing.
All right. Well, actually, this happened to me twice in the last couple of years. Is 2 different people came to me, and their parents had left them the house along with their siblings. So their parents thought they were doing the right thing by saying, Joey, Mary, and Richie get 1/3 each.
Right.
But Mary sold her house, moved in with Dad to take care of him for the last 10 years.
Oh my God.
And has 2 disabled children. And now the 2 brothers, we're going to sell the house.
Right.
What do you mean you're going to sell the house? This is where I live. I can't move. I can't. I don't know.
Yep.
We're going to sell the house.
Yep.
And then another gentleman, he was in his late 70s. He had lived in this particular house his entire life. His wife had lived there with him for 50 years. It was a 2-family house, and mom passes away, leaves 50-50 to sister and brother. Mom's barely cold in the ground, and the sister's like, okay, so we're selling.
Right.
And he's like, what do you mean? What do you mean we're selling? I can't sell this. This is my house.
Right.
And he doesn't have money to refinance to take her, buy her out. He has no children, so ultimately she's his beneficiary anyway.
Right.
So we ended up arranging for a reverse mortgage.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah.
And to
So
buy him
we
out.
were able to buy her out with the reverse mortgage. So I don't always say a reverse mortgage is the perfect vehicle, but it has its uses.
I agree. I say that about variable annuities.
Yeah.
They're great for the right person, but they're terrible for the wrong person.
Yeah.
The same applies to reverse mortgages.
So a little planning
Right.
would have been better than just a strict will saying 50-50 and we're all good.
Yeah.
You got, and that's actually one of my standard questions when I ask people, like, do you have a child that lives in the house with you
Right.
to take care of you?
Yeah.
We can put it into a trust. We can make the trust, I recently did a trust where the gentleman or the son who lives with her takes care of her, and he's adding things to the house, etc.
Yeah.
And so there's a provision in there. They cannot sell the house until he agrees.
Right. So we get this call a lot. When we buy houses, our average seller is probably between 70 and 90. And I'm not counting if I'm dealing with the children. The average homeowner's home that we buy is probably between 70 and 90. We buy homes from people any age, but that's the sort of our sweet spot. I say the house with orange shed carpet and dark wood paneling. And
Like my house when I bought it.
there you go. Exactly. The one I bought my first house too.
1990.
The house I'm living in now had heavy stucco on the walls, and I had a 3.5-year-old, and he would have been bloodied if we didn't rip off all the sheetrock before we moved in. So yeah, the things people did back then. But anyway, were they going to say that when they look at my house in 50 years? I don't know. Probably. It's gray or beige, depends which one you look at. So anyway, it seems innocuous. But but we get calls from the kids in this case where exactly what you're talking about. And one of the kids wants to sell his share of the house.
Mm-hmm.
I say, if you're going to sell your share of the house, it's worth about 25 cents on the dollar because I can't get the whole house.
Mm-hmm.
I only get your share until your brother or sister agrees to sell at some point in the future. I'm sitting on this kind of dead asset in the meantime. Additionally, your brother or sister could run into financial troubles and end up getting liens on the house, which affects we're buying the equity. And there may be no mortgage, but there may be a mortgage later. Maybe they run up credit card debt of $100,000. So people don't understand why we can't pay much. So if you really want to help your kids, don't put them in that position to accept 25 cents on the dollar for the value of the house. And even that we don't even like to do because people think it's such a bargain. That's high risk.
It's very risky.
Very risky.
I did have a client who did something similar, and he bought the daughter's half, and then he was in litigation for over a year,
right,
to try to resolve that. And
how did it work out?
He didn't come to me for that particular.
Okay.
I said, look, I can't. I'm not going to do this.
Right.
I will refer you to another attorney. It's still in litigation.
Still in litigation.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And that's expensive.
I was told a partition action, is that the right word?
A partition action, yes.
Can take 5 years.
It can.
Explain just briefly what that is so people know.
Okay, so in real estate, there's several ways to hold real estate. You can either be married, and it's called tenants by the entirety. It means one person dies, the other person lives, gets it.
I never heard
the same
tenant
thing
inheritance.
as joint tenants with rights to survivorship.
That's what I was here.
JTROS.
Correct.
So you and I own property together. I die, it goes to you. You die, it comes to me. Okay, so that's joint tenants. The third way of owning property is tenants in common.
Right.
Again, we own property. You die, it goes to your heirs. I die, it goes to my heirs. So that can be very messy.
Yeah.
I forget where we're going with
partition
this.
action.
Oh, a partition action. So and I'm actually involved in two right now. One is they inherited the property from mom. One of the brothers decided that he was going to just unilaterally rent it. They wanted it sold, and the other two wanted it sold, and he didn't. He wanted to rent it, so we were stuck for quite a while. We finally get it sold, and I had to start the petition action because I wanted to force him to sell the house.
Right.
And eventually we agreed, we worked out an agreement, and now we're still fighting over the money.
Oh.
Now sitting in with the proceeds in my escrow account till we get some sort of settlement.
I thought that'd be the easy part, the money. If they just divide it evenly, it doesn't work.
No, because he has claims for, this, that, and the other thing that he wanted.
Right.
He allegedly paid for this and paid for that, so he wants the money back. But my client is like, well, I wanted it sold 3 years ago.
Right.
And, there's, so, and there's, of course, he claims there's claims against him for mishandling his mother's money. And, so there's a lot of emotions.
Yes.
Emotions are huge.
It goes beyond just this one issue.
Absolutely. Always does.
Right.
Always does. And I have another one right now. We're actually, I think, about to settle it. They were together for a long time. They bought a house. They had a daughter. And they broke up.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want my name off the mortgage. I want my name off the house. I want my money. He's refused to sell it. He gives her some BS, like, oh, I'll give you $10,000. She's like, no. So we had to force the issue by filing a partition action. And unfortunately, we had to make a motion to appoint a referee because they still weren't going anywhere. But now that we have the referee somewhat involved, again, that gets expensive.
Yes.
It's a good partition action would be anywhere from $9,000 to $20,000. Depending on what needs to be done.
Yeah.
So who has $20,000 around to when you want to sell the house, let's go.
Right.
It was completely unnecessary. So we're in the process of negotiating that right now.
I don't have an attorney who does partition actions, so I'm glad we're having this discussion.
Yeah. Partition actions and quiet title actions. I'm starting to really get more involved. Here's a good one. A quiet title action.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing a trust for a gentleman who doesn't have any children. His parents are gone. He's got his niece and 2 nephews, and he wants to give his house to his niece and 2 nephews. Now, he's lived in this house his entire life. His parents owned the property. He inherited it through his parents, or so he thought.
Oh. There's nothing quiet about this.
So no. And it's been a long time getting to this point. We finally found an investigative attorney. I'll tell you. So back in the 60s, they didn't have the same kind of bankruptcy protections that we have now. His father filed bankruptcy, and they sold his father's share to a third party. So that's why I said he thought he inherited the property, but he didn't.
Right. I haven't heard this one yet.
It's and we're talking 1964. So when we had to go find the deed so that we had the description to put it into the trust, do the deed transfer into the trust, we found this. And we're like, who is this? He said, I don't know. My parents said something about this way back in the 60s. And so what we have to do, and I found an investigative attorney who was able to track down this man's descendants.
Right. I say he's no longer alive. 60 years ago, he was an adult.
Yeah. And then his children, he had no children.
Oh, the mortgage holder or whatever, the buyer. Not a mortgage holder, the buyer.
Yes. His co-tenant.
Right.
He had no children. He was married twice, had no children. But I couldn't find anything. All we had was the last known address.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in Connecticut. So I had to hire somebody at like $3,000 to go do an investigative search. So now that we have the descendants, it's his brother's children's children.
His brother's okay. Oh my God. So his grandnephew.
Grandnieces and nephews. Yeah. So we just got the report last week, and we're trying to determine which is the best way to go forward. We're still going to go forward with the quiet title action because there's about 7 people who may have an interest in this property. And to get everybody to sign a quitclaim deed would be very expensive.
Right.
And record it, et cetera. And so we are going to, write to them and let them know what's going to happen. And so we have to quiet the title saying that this is my, you're not going to object to any of this. We're giving it, and we still may have to do a quitclaim deed as well, but we want a court order.
Are they going to get any compensation? No compensation.
Why would they get compensation? They didn't even know they had this place.
But
they haven't paid the taxes in 40, 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
They haven't done any of the maintenance. They didn't even know they had it.
Did they own the whole thing?
No, they only they owned half.
Right.
So, and that's been diluted by like 8 people.
Right. Very interesting. So do you think you'll be successful in them all signing off?
Yeah, it's just going to take some time. And my client's in his now early 80s.
Right.
And so we are racing against time.
So he's trying to resolve. Oh, he's still alive. So
He's
it's not
still
like
alive.
his niece and nephew are dealing with this.
No,
He's dealing with it.
he's dealing
Thank
with
God
it.
for that, for
Yeah,
their sake.
because he did not want his nieces and
Right.
nephews to have to deal with this.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
It's just going to kick the can down the generational,
Correct.
So we are trying to resolve this now. So that's where the experience of being a real estate attorney and an estate planning attorney really what works very well.
Right. Very.
So I could go on and on about stories, of the things that I say. It's just, I've been I've been an attorney for over 25 years.
Right.
And the things you see are just incredible. Nobody gets, oh yeah, we're going to be fine. We're going to distribute to mom and dad until money gets involved.
Right.
And then you get arguments.
Right. So question for you. We can share stories all day long. And every time you tell a story, I think of either from my financial days or my real estate days, because you're in both arenas. And boy, I really relate. I'm hoping people are relating, and they're realizing they have to take action.
They do.
Very few people are properly prepared. I tell people my wills and trust with my wife are about this thick. I keep them. It's actually on the shelf below my coffee table because I reference it, and my power of attorney and my healthcare proxy should be right there so I could bring it with me tomorrow. But if you were to say there's one takeaway, is one thing that you want to tell people you've got to do, what would that one thing be?
If you have a will right now, if you have an estate plan and things have changed, update it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't cost you anything to go to an attorney. I don't charge to review it.
Right.
If you want to make some changes, we'll talk. But be prepared. That's the old Girl Scout in me.
Yeah.
The Girl Scout motto, be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Protect your assets, protect your legacy.
Right.
Make sure that you have planned to do it the way you want it. Because like I said previously, New York has a plan if you don't.
Right.
It may not be the one you want. I had a long story, very, very short. Young man had two brothers in jail, didn't want anything to do with them. He's gotten a little bit of money, moved down south, and accidentally gets killed. He's got a lovely girlfriend and no will.
Right.
Guess who's his natural objects of his bounty?
That's right.
His two disgusting brothers.
Yeah. It's too.
And so the girlfriend got nothing.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. If you are not married,
yes,
you have no rights to each other's property.
correct.
You may have been together for 40 years, but if you're not married, you have no protections.
Correct.
So be prepared. If that's the biggest takeaway, go see somebody. Just have a review. Put something on a napkin and have it witnessed properly. Do it right.
It's funny. People think they write a will for themselves, but they're really writing it for their beneficiaries.
Right.
Because without a will, life is so complicated. And when I used to sell long-term care insurance, I was very careful. Same thing. It's great for the right person, terrible for the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
To repeat what we said about 10 minutes ago. And I say you buy long-term care insurance not for you, but the person's going to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing for a will. You're buying it for the person who's going to have to take care of your estate. You're gone. It's not going to affect you whether it's easy or not easy. It's going to affect them. So the people you love are the ones getting your assets. Make sure you do the right thing by them.
I'm in the process of putting together a booklet. It's called "I'm Dead, Now What."
Then now what? There you go. Very good.
So it's going to have all my important doctors, all my important papers, my last regrets,
Right.
my letters to my family. Where do I keep this document? What kind of assets do I have? It's a notebook.
Right.
And you can sit there and fill it out. I mean, it's just an addition to when my mom passed away. I have four sisters, and a brother, and my dad loved to buy her jewelry. He was a truck driver and he traveled a lot, and he loved to buy her costume jewelry. So we used to love to play in the jewelry box, and so we all had memories of the jewelry box. So we sat down after the funeral, and we went around to each one of us and took a piece of jewelry that meant something to us. And there was, but we did it civilized.
Right.
We had a couple of drinks and we sat around and
it is costume jewelry.
And it was costume jewelry.
Right.
And so, we all had the little pieces. But not everybody family can do that or will do that.
I know.
Like I said,
Right.
Mom's just barely buried and she's saying, let's sell the house.
Yep. I remember my mother's engagement ring, which was a sizable, expensive engagement ring. My sister said, "Can I have it?" And she gave it to her daughter, absolutely. It was rather civilized. And I know that's believe that's the rarity. We're very lucky that way. You can say something else, going to make a comment, and I forgot what I was going to say, so I'm just not going to say it, obviously. But the question I have for you is, how did people get in contact with you?
Okay.
And I know I was going to say real quickly, just a quick shameless plug for ourselves, and we have a website. I'm going to look at my crew. It's leavethekey.com/probate. Is that correct? And I'm getting nods. It helps people go through the probate process in New York, which is a pain in the ass. So leavethekey.com/probate. It's just something we put together to give back to the senior community the same way we put this podcast on for the very same reason. So, but now I'll say, how do people get in contact with you?
Well, Sugarman Law is located at 375 Comac Road in Deer Park. It's a nice it's right over by the Tanger outlets.
Oh, there you go.
know what they are.
Get a little shopping while they're visiting. Yeah.
Believe it or not, it used to be the district court many, many years ago. So it's in that office building. You can call me at 631-406-7600.
631-406-7600. Very good.
My email is my first initial, my last name. So that's ssugarman at sugarmanlawpc.com. And the reason why I say PC is because there's another Sugarman Law PLLC, and they're a foreclosure company foreclosure firm up in Buffalo and Spearfield.
Very different.
We're
very different. So PC, okay.
PC.com.
When I send you an email, by the way, I find it very hard because the two S's throw up every time. Yeah, every time.
Yeah. So I adopted it that way. I guess it could have been Shari at.
Right. It sounds better though.
That's Sugarman.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always have to spell it SSUGARMAN at sugarmanlawpc.com.
Right, very good. So I thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the process.
I did. Very quickly.
It went very quickly, you did. We're talking probably 3/4 of an hour or so. But anyway, thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Unlocking Senior Resources podcast by Leave the Key. If you've enjoyed this episode or found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast. We specialize in working with seniors who are transitioning out of their homes, and we understand what you are going through. So if you are considering selling your home and would like an alternative to the traditional overwhelming process, reach out to see how we can help. When working with us, you can sell your home in its current condition, there is no need to remove unwanted items, and you control when the house is sold, along with so many other advantages. Visit leavethekey.com or call us at 631-388-7771 to learn more about our senior home buying process.